Maya Rodriguez had spent the last 2 years fixing engines instead of flying them. At 31, she worked the graveyard shift at Peterson Air Force Base as a civilian contractor, maintaining Black Hawk helicopters that other people got to pilot. Her small trailer on the outskirts of Colorado Springs was nothing fancy, but the rent was cheap and it gave her a clear view of the flight line where helicopters took off every morning. What her supervisor didn't know was that Maya had been flying since she was 16. Her uncle Roberto, a crop duster in California's Central Valley, had taught her to handle aircraft before she could legally drive. By 18, she'd accumulated enough flight hours to qualify for commercial certification, but family financial troubles had forced her into the military as an enlisted mechanic instead of pursuing officer training. During her 8 years in the Army, Maya had developed an innovative maintenance protocol for rotor blade stress detection that could prevent catastrophic failures. She'd submitted the technical report through proper channels, but it had vanished into the bureaucratic void. When budget cuts hit, Maya found herself among the first wave of personnel reductions, her specialized knowledge deemed redundant. The acceptance email from Skyline Flight Academy appeared in her inbox on a Tuesday evening. Maya had applied on a whim after seeing their advertisement for a fast-track helicopter pilot certification program designed for military veterans. The message was simple: application approved, classes begin Monday, tuition assistance available for qualified candidates. Skyline Flight Academy operated out of a converted hangar at a small municipal airport 20 miles south of the city. The facility wasn't fancy: concrete floors, folding chairs, and a handful of aging training helicopters, but Maya could smell the aviation fuel and hear the distinctive whop-whop of rotor blades. For the first time in months, she felt hopeful. Maya arrived early on her first day, wearing her cleanest work clothes and carrying a notebook she'd bought at the dollar store. The other students filtered in gradually, mostly young men with expensive gear and confident attitudes. She recognized the type immediately: trust fund kids using daddy's money to buy themselves wings. That's when she met Chief Instructor Robert Tank Williams. Tank Williams filled the doorway like a wall of muscle and attitude. The former Marine drill instructor had arms covered in military tattoos and a voice that could strip paint from aircraft fuselage. He swept his gaze across the dozen assembled students with obvious disdain. "Listen up, maggots," Tank barked, his voice echoing off the hangar walls. "This ain't summer camp, and I ain't your friend. Half of you will wash out in the first month. The other half will quit when you realize flying helicopters ain't like playing video games." His eyes locked onto Maya, taking in her thrift store clothes and worn-out boots. "Some of you are here because Mommy and Daddy think pilot wings will look good on the family Christmas card. Others," he paused, staring directly at Maya, "are here because you think being a grease monkey qualifies you to handle real aircraft." Maya felt her cheeks burn, but kept her expression neutral. Around her, she could sense the other students' interest, like sharks detecting blood in the water. "Rodriguez," Tank called out, reading from his clipboard. "Step forward." Maya stood and walked to the front of the room, acutely aware of every creak in her old boots. "You worked maintenance at Peterson, right? Fixed a few helicopters?" "Yes, sir. 8 years active duty, 2 years contractor." Tank nodded slowly. "Fixing aircraft and flying them are two completely different skills, Rodriguez. Just because you can change oil doesn't mean you can handle the stick. We'll see if you've got what it takes, or if you're just another wannabe mechanic with delusions of grandeur." The message was clear. Maya didn't belong here. The first practical lesson took place in the Academy simulator, a basic setup that reproduced helicopter controls and responses. Each student was given 30 minutes to complete a simple hover and land exercise while Tank observed and took notes. Maya watched as the other students took their turns. Most struggled with the coordination required to manage collective, cyclic, and rudder pedals simultaneously. A few managed decent attempts while others crashed the simulated aircraft within minutes. When Maya's turn came, she slipped into the simulator seat and immediately felt at home. Her hands found the controls naturally, muscle memory taking over from years of unauthorized practice sessions on real aircraft during maintenance checks. She completed the exercise flawlessly, then added a few advanced maneuvers she'd learned from her uncle. Tank reviewed her performance with a scowl.
"Adequate," he announced to the room. "But simulators don't bite back like real helicopters. We'll see how you handle actual flight conditions." But Maya had caught the surprised look in his eyes when she'd executed a perfect auto-rotation landing.
Tank Williams wasn't expecting competence from the maintenance girl, and that made her dangerous to his preconceptions. The harassment started small. Maya's assigned helicopter always seemed to have minor issues that required extra pre-flight inspections. Tank would assign her the oldest aircraft with the most sensitive controls, then criticize her technique when she compensated for the machine's quirks. During ground school, Tank would single her out with increasingly difficult questions, clearly hoping to expose gaps in her knowledge. When Maya answered correctly, he'd dismiss her responses as book learning that didn't translate to real-world flying. The other students quickly picked up on Tank's attitude. Jake Morrison, whose father owned a chain of auto dealerships, made pointed comments about diversity programs and lowered standards. During breaks, conversations would stop when Maya approached, then resume with discussions about people who didn't understand their place. Maya's only ally was instructor Jennifer Walsh, a former Army helicopter pilot who taught navigation and emergency procedures. Walsh had been watching Tank's behavior with growing concern. "Don't let him get to you," Walsh told Maya after a particularly brutal critique session. "Tank's old school. He believes certain people don't belong in cockpits, but I've seen your work. You've got natural talent." The situation escalated during Maya's first solo flight evaluation. Tank had scheduled her for the worst weather conditions, gusty, crosswinds and low visibility that challenged even experienced pilots. As Maya performed her required maneuvers, Tank's voice crackled through the radio with a constant stream of criticism. "Sloppy approach, Rodriguez. Real pilots maintain precision regardless of conditions. Altitude control is marginal, commercial. Operators would ground you for that performance." Despite the criticism, Maya completed every required task within acceptable parameters. When she landed, Tank was waiting with a clipboard and a stern expression. "Barely passing," he announced, marking her evaluation form. "You'll need significant improvement before I can recommend you for advanced training." But Jennifer Walsh had been monitoring the flight from the control tower. She'd watched Maya handle the difficult conditions with skill that impressed even the most experienced instructors. That evening, Walsh pulled Maya aside. "I recorded your flight performance data," she said quietly. "Your actual numbers were outstanding, better than most students I've seen. Tank's evaluation doesn't match reality." Maya stared at the flight. Data printouts, her altitude control, had been within 5 feet throughout the entire flight. Her airspeed management was textbook perfect. Tank had lied on her evaluation. "Why would he do that?" Maya asked. Walsh's expression was grim. "Because he's decided you don't belong here, and he's willing to falsify records to prove his point." The breaking point came during Maya's check ride for her commercial helicopter license. This was the make-or-break moment. Pass, and she'd earn her wings Fail, and her dream would be over. Tank had scheduled Maya's check ride with Federal Aviation's Administration Examiner David Burton, a notoriously difficult evaluator known for failing students over minor technical infractions. The weather forecast showed marginal conditions with possible thunderstorms, but Tank refused to reschedule. "Real pilots fly in real weather," he told Maya the night before. "If you can't handle a little turbulence, maybe you should stick to fixing helicopters instead of flying them." Maya spent the evening reviewing emergency procedures and practicing instrument approaches on the Academy's simulator. She knew this was her only chance. Tank would never allow a retest if she failed. The morning of her check ride, Maya arrived to find that her assigned helicopter, the Academy's newest and most reliable aircraft, had been switched. Instead, she was given helicopter N-47, a 20-year-old machine with a reputation for unpredictable behavior. The switch had been made due to scheduling conflicts, according to Tank's notes. As Maya began her pre-flight inspection, she discovered several concerning issues. The collective control felt loose, the radio had intermittent static, and the engine temperature gauge showed erratic readings. Any one of these problems would normally ground the aircraft for maintenance. Maya approached Tank with her concerns. "Sir, this helicopter has multiple discrepancies that affect flight safety. I recommend switching to a different aircraft." Tank's smile was cold. "The aircraft is airworthy, Rodriguez. Maybe you're just looking for excuses because you're nervous about your check ride." Maya realized what was happening. Tank was setting her up to fail with a deliberately compromised aircraft, but cancelling the check ride would mean admitting she couldn't handle the challenges, giving Tank the excuse he needed to recommend her dismissal from the program. Maya made her decision. She would fly the check ride as scheduled, but she'd document every problem with the aircraft. If Tank wanted to play games, she'd make sure there was evidence of his sabotage. As she strapped into the helicopter with Examiner Burton, Maya's hands were steady on the controls. She'd faced worse odds before. This was just another challenge to overcome. But she had no idea that Tank's sabotage was about to put her life and Burton's in serious danger. 20 minutes into the check ride, Maya was demonstrating auto-rotation procedures when the helicopter's engine began running rough. The RPM fluctuations were subtle at first, but Maya's trained ear caught the irregularity immediately. "Engine's not running clean," she reported to Examiner Burton through the intercom. "Recommend returning to base for inspection." Burton, focused on his evaluation checklist, waved off her concern. "Continue with the exercise. Minor power variations are normal in older aircraft." But Maya knew these weren't normal variations. The engine was developing a serious problem that could lead to complete failure. Tank's airworthy helicopter was becoming a death trap at 500 feet altitude. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Warning lights began flickering on the instrument panel, and the helicopter's vibration increased noticeably. Maya had two choices: continue the check ride and risk a catastrophic engine failure, or abort the test and face Tank's wrath for making excuses. Maya chose a third option. She would complete the check ride while simultaneously documenting every mechanical failure for the official record. If the helicopter killed them, at least there would be evidence of Tank's negligence. "Mr. Burton," Maya said calmly, "I'm going to complete your required maneuvers, but I need you to note in your report that this aircraft is experiencing progressive mechanical failures. Engine RPM is unstable, electrical system is intermittent,
and vibration levels are approaching unsafe limits." Burton finally looked up from his clipboard, registering the seriousness in Maya's voice. "Are you declaring an emergency?" "Not yet, sir."
"But I'm implementing precautionary procedures and preparing for a possible emergency landing." For the next 15 minutes, Maya demonstrated airmanship that would have impressed seasoned military pilots. She completed every required maneuver, while managing a progressively failing aircraft, keeping Burton informed of each developing problem and her responses. When the engine finally began losing serious power, Maya was ready. She'd already identified 3 possible emergency landing sites and calculated approach angles for each. Her auto-rotation to a small field beside the highway was textbook perfect. Gentle touchdown, no damage to aircraft or occupants. As they sat in the suddenly quiet helicopter, Burton stared at Maya with new respect. "In 30 years of conducting check rides," he said slowly, "I've never seen a student handle multiple emergencies with that level of composure and skill." Maya's response was simple. "I've been preparing for this my whole life, sir." Burton's evaluation report would reflect Maya's exceptional performance under emergency conditions. But more importantly, his testimony would provide crucial evidence of Tank's deliberate sabotage. The fight for Maya's future was about to begin in earnest. The emergency landing made local news. "Student pilot saves FAA examiner in emergency landing," read the headline in the Colorado Springs Gazette. The article praised Maya's quick thinking and professional handling of a potentially fatal situation. Tank Williams was furious. His plan to humiliate Maya had backfired spectacularly, turning her into a local hero. Worse, the emergency had triggered a mandatory FAA investigation of the aircraft's mechanical condition, which would inevitably expose his role in putting a compromised helicopter into service. Tank's response was swift and vicious. He called Maya into his office the day after the emergency landing, his face red with barely controlled anger. "Congratulations, Rodriguez," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You managed to turn a routine check ride into a media circus. I suppose you think you're some kind of hero now." Maya remained standing at attention. "Sir, I completed the required maneuvers and handled an emergency situation according to proper procedures." "You created the emergency situation," Tank snapped. "That helicopter was in perfect condition before you got your hands on it. But instead of admitting your mistakes, you're trying to blame mechanical failure for your poor performance." Maya felt her temper rising, but kept her voice level. "Sir, Examiner Burton's report documents multiple mechanical failures that occurred during flight. The aircraft's maintenance logs should be reviewed to determine when these problems developed." Tank leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile crossing his face. "Funny you should mention maintenance logs, Rodriguez, because I've been reviewing your background and I found some interesting information about your military service." He opened a file folder and began reading. "Multiple disciplinary actions for unauthorized aircraft operations. Repeated violations
of maintenance protocols, failure to follow direct orders from superior officers." Tank looked up with satisfaction.
Sounds like you've always had trouble respecting authority and following rules." Maya stared at Tank in shock. Every allegation he'd just read was false. Her military record was clean. She'd never received disciplinary action of any kind. "Sir, those allegations are incorrect. I can provide my actual service records to verify." "Are you calling me a liar, Rodriguez?" Tank's voice rose to a roar. "These documents came directly from your personnel file, unless you're suggesting someone—"
Falsified official military records. Maya realized with growing horror that Tank had done exactly that.
He'd fabricated disciplinary records to destroy her credibility and justify her dismissal from the program. "I'm suspending you from flight operations pending a full review of your background and qualifications," Tank announced. "You're grounded until further notice." As Maya left Tank's office, she knew the situation had escalated beyond simple harassment. Tank was now actively manufacturing evidence to destroy her career. But Maya had something Tank didn't know about. allies who had been documenting his behavior from the beginning. Jennifer Walsh was waiting in the hallway when Maya emerged from the office. One look at Maya's face told her everything she needed to know. "He's falsified your records, hasn't he?" Walsh said quietly. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Then it's time to fight back," Walsh said firmly. "I've been building a case against Tank for months. Today we take it to the authorities." The confrontation happened during the Academy's monthly safety meeting with all instructors and senior students present. Tank had called the meeting to discuss maintaining program standards and dealing with unsuitable candidates, a thinly veiled attack on Maya's continued enrollment. Maya sat in the back row, officially grounded but still allowed to attend academic sessions. Tank began his presentation with statistics about student failure rates and the importance of rigorous evaluation standards. "Some individuals," Tank said, clicking to a slide titled Problem Students, attempt to use external factors to explain their poor performance. Weather conditions, mechanical issues, even falsified military records. These are all excuses used by people who lack the character and skill necessary for professional aviation. The room was silent, everyone understanding that Tank was talking about Maya without naming her directly. "In my 20 years of instruction," Tank continued, "I've learned to identify students who will never meet professional standards, regardless of how much training they receive. The responsible thing is to counsel these individuals out of the program before they endanger themselves or others." That's when Maya stood up. "Chief Williams," she said clearly, "are you referring to the emergency landing that saved Examiner Burton's life when you talk about endangering others?" Tank's face darkened. "Sit down, Rodriguez. You're not authorized to speak during this briefing." "Actually, she is," came a voice from the doorway. Federal Aviation Administration Inspector Rachel Martinez entered the room, followed by 2 other officials. "We're here conducting an investigation into allegations of instructor misconduct and falsified records." Tank's confident expression cracked. "Inspector Martinez, I wasn't aware. We've been monitoring communications and reviewing documentation for the past week," Martinez interrupted. "Based on evidence provided by Instructor Walsh and corroborated by multiple witnesses, we have serious concerns about the conduct of this training program." Maya felt Jennifer Walsh squeeze her shoulder supportively. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. Inspector Martinez addressed the room. "Our investigation has revealed a pattern of discriminatory treatment, deliberate sabotage of aircraft, and falsification of student records. These actions not only violate federal aviation regulations, but also constitute criminal fraud." Tank's face had gone white. "I don't know what you think you've found, but—" "We found your emails to maintenance staff requesting delays in repairing aircraft assigned to certain students," Martinez said flatly. "We found your handwritten notes about making training more challenging for candidates you deemed unsuitable, and we found the original, unaltered military records that prove you fabricated disciplinary actions against Miss Rodriguez." The room erupted in whispers and shocked gasps. Students and instructors stared at Tank with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Maya stood again, her voice steady and clear. "Chief Williams, you said some people lack the character necessary for professional aviation. You were right about that, but you were wrong about who those people are." Tank looked around the room desperately, seeking support that was no longer there. Even his most loyal instructors were backing away, realizing the scope of his misconduct. "Robert Williams," Inspector Martinez announced formally, "you are hereby suspended from all flight instruction duties pending criminal investigation. Your instructor certifications are revoked effective immediately." As federal marshals entered to escort Tank from the building, he turned one last time to Maya. "This isn't over, Rodriguez," he said bitterly. Maya met his gaze calmly. "Yes, sir, it is." 3 months later, Maya Rodriguez stood on the flight line at Denver International Airport, wearing the crisp uniform of Rocky Mountain Helicopter Services. The company had hired her immediately after she earned her commercial helicopter license, impressed by her technical skills and the media attention surrounding her story. Tank Williams had been convicted of federal fraud charges and sentenced to 2 years in prison. His conviction had triggered investigations at other flight schools, exposing a network of discriminatory practices that had kept qualified pilots out of cockpits for years. Skyline Flight Academy had undergone complete restructuring under new management. Jennifer Walsh had been promoted to chief instructor, and the academy now served as a model for inclusive aviation training. Applications from women and minority students had increased by 400%, and the academy's safety record had improved dramatically. Maya's emergency landing had made her something of a celebrity in aviation circles. She'd been invited to speak at conferences and write articles about crisis management and aircraft safety. The emergency procedure she'd developed during the engine failure was now taught at flight schools across the country. But the moment Maya treasured most came during a routine medical transport flight. She was flying a critically injured child from a rural hospital to the trauma center in Denver when weather conditions deteriorated rapidly. Heavy snow and high winds had grounded most aircraft, but Maya's skills and experience allowed her to complete the flight safely. As she watched paramedics rush the young patient into the hospital, Maya thought about her Uncle Roberto's words from years ago. "Flying isn't about showing off, mija. It's about being where people need you when they need you most." Her radio crackled to life. "Rocky Mountain 47, outstanding work today. That was some of the finest flying I've ever seen." Maya smiled, keying her microphone. "Just doing my job, Control. Ready for the next mission." 6 months later, Maya received a letter that brought her story full circle. It was from a young woman named Jessica Martinez who had just been accepted to Skyline Flight Academy's pilot training program. "Dear Captain Rodriguez," the letter began, "I wanted to thank you for making it possible for people like me to pursue our dreams. Your example showed me that excellence and determination matter
More than what other people think we're capable of.
I start flight training next month, and I promise to live up to the standards you've set." Maya carefully filed the letter with dozens of others she'd received from aspiring pilots around the country. Tank Williams had tried to ground her dreams, but instead he'd given her wings that lifted others into the sky. The warehouse job at Denver Logistics felt like a lifetime ago. Maya Rodriguez had found her place in the sky, and she was using that position to make sure others could find theirs too. Excellence, she'd learned, wasn't about proving you belonged. It was about making room for others to belong alongside you. As she prepared for another flight, Maya touched the small pin on her uniform collar, a gift from her uncle Roberto, featuring a helicopter silhouette and the words, "that others may fly." Some battles were worth fighting not just for yourself, but for everyone who would come after. Maya Rodriguez had won her fight for the sky. Now it was her job to keep it open for others. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.